the works of this sixth regional conference on social development. To begin with, I congratulate Minister Javiera from Chile and for the exemplary leadership in the presidency in the past 2 years. We're very thankful to all the delegations from the United Nations and the partner institutions in the countries represented here. Allow me to remind a symbolic moment. It was in Santiago, Chile, in the last meeting of this regional conference, when Brazil took on the commitment to host this conference. On that occasion, I said that I believed in the strength of cooperation and solidarity as a pathway for us to overcome together hunger, poverty, and inequality. Today, I reaffirm that conviction that only united and coordinating our policies and knowledge and efforts will we accelerate the concrete results for those who most need them. This meeting of the regional conference is taking on the eve of a historic moment, the second World Summit on Development in Doha, in Qatar, and the first meeting of leaders of the Global Conference on Inequality in that summit. It's a unique opportunity for us to align the voices and to build a common position, not only amongst the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, but also involving representatives of other regions of the world. And here I'm particularly thankful to thank countries like Spain and others that are important partners. And I invite all of you now to have a dialogue to be held tomorrow at 1 p.m. right here in this conference room. This will be an open space for dialogue and understandings, not only for our region, but beyond it, for us to go beyond Brasilia and leave Brasilia with a clear, convergent message towards Doha. The experience of Latin America shows that well-designed public policies with the social participation focused on the most vulnerable are able to turn the page on hunger and poverty in a short time. Just a month ago, I was present in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia at the launching of the 2025 edition of the report on the state of food insecurity in the world of the United Nations, which recognized notable progress in our region in fighting hunger and confirmed that Brazil has left the map of hunger for the second time. I would highlight the reduction when we look at going back to 2023 when we began this debate on the organization of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty until New Delhi in India, when Brazil was the chair in bringing the G20 companies in, but not only G20, but all countries that are members of the United Nations, to retake the objectives of the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. Since then, 57 million people in the world have the guarantee of food security. People who were hungry and who came out of hunger. That is something that we must commemorate as an important step for the world. Our region, for decades, has been a good living laboratory for social progress with care systems, school food systems, family farming systems, primary health care, and social protection, social networks, with good social records coming out of that. That is a watchtower for the world. And Brazil it took over that international conference during a disturbing time, international, with political threats and conflicts threatening the social. But with President Lula's leadership, we have been able to overcome these challenges with hard work, showing that it's best to bet on solidarity and democracy. The Global Alliance Against Poverty and Hunger, in fewer than 10 months after it was launched, has made progress decisively towards formulating and implementing several programs on a large scale, particularly in 8 countries that have made greatest progress. It is an example that hope can find space even in a difficult context. There are 197 members now in the entire world. And this conference, therefore, should be a moment for greater efforts towards those conquests, and time for reflection and convergence on what measures we must take to keep us from going back, but to continue to advance in our social development. You can count on Brazil. Thank you very much, and welcome to Brasilia. Have a great conference. Thank you very much, Minister. And now we give the floor to Javiera Toro, the Minister of Social Development and Families in Chile, and as the chairperson of this conference. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Good morning to all of you who are with us, the Executive Secretary of ECLAC, who is with us virtually, representing the UNDP, Minister Wellington Diaz, Alberto, ministers who are with us, representative of countries, friends. Today we are meeting to talk about social development in a historic context, no doubt marked by tensions and challenges, but also where we see possibilities. With authoritarianism and hate speech is growing in many parts of the world, we are challenged when we see the social fabric being threatened, rights are threatened, and public interest. And we have fragile institutions, economic concentration, and international architecture that has been incapable to hold back these forces and inequalities and uncertainties. We're going through multiple crises. The great powers are deciding on the future of humanity, often with no accountability. Wars affecting millions of people, climate crises, perpetual economic challenges, and discrimination by the transnational corporations. But the people have to meet their urgent daily needs. In that sense, Chile is reaffirming that we are not just we cannot be indifferent or nationalistic. We must be multilateral, but not the kind of multilateralism we have often seen, which has not been effective to confront the many crises and impacts on the population. We need to revitalize multilateralism and to focus on new goals and tools, most urgently the protection of our populations and development of our capacities. From the global south, we have the historic duty and capacity to raise our voices clearly and be audacious in pushing for a change in direction. We must recognize that multilateralism today has given too much room to minimum consensus, to diplomatic calculations, and conditioned financing. And there are well-written speeches, but systems are collapsing, rights are being destroyed. And we need multilateralism that has a backbone in the defense of rights and to advance the democracy from Latin America and the Caribbean, we can and must raise this possibility for the world. And one of the pillars of that new agenda must be sustainable social development, not just access to basic services, but also structural transformations, opening up gaps and for well-being. There is no sustainable social development without universal social protection. We must confront doubt and exclusion, and to avoid disease, old age, and climate crisis that become individual crises. But people must be able to build dignified lives. Without social protection, there is no full citizenship, and without full citizenship, there is no democracy that can last. In Chile, this is part of our legacy and what we are working on with much conviction in the President Boric's government. A social system that is redistributing wealth and especially including women. We are assuring the inclusion of children and adolescents. And we have dignified conditions for good living at all stages of life, putting an end to indebtedness for studying. We must be able to learn and defend together what we have conquested, what we have won with great efforts. We have had enough setbacks. We have to be able to look to the future with a clear vision. So we're very thankful to President Lula and through him, Minister Diaz, and the people of Brazil, not just for having defended courageously democracy in front of clear challenges, but that we can grow without abandoning anyone. Programs like Family Stipend have been very important for the entire region. This is clear not just to reduce poverty, but to strengthen the links between the state and the citizenry. We believe the state must have a central role in ensuring rights. That implies abandoning the focus on social development in recent decades to look at universal rights and quality. Social rights must be supported by progressive, sustainable, and democratically debated financial systems, not just redistributing resources, but have a new social pact in the framework of a new development strategy where that is not just a privilege of a few, but a shared possibility. I conclude with this an invitation that this conference be not just a space for diagnosis or declarations of good intentions, that we come out with a common roadmap and with commitments for us to push together for a world pact for inclusive social development, defending the rights we have already won, getting new guarantees, and putting people and communities and territories in the center. The work we have done, we will do in this regional social development Congress, which we presided in Chile in the last 2 years, is a proof of the contribution we can make to Latin America and the Caribbean for looking at the global summit in November. Because it's not just social policies. What's at stake is democracy, and peace and development overall. We have to work together as a region with valor and solidarity, and convinced that we can have better development models for all. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. We'll give the floor now to head economist of UNDP, Almudena Fernandez. Good morning, Mr. Wellington Barroso, Minister of Development, Social Development, Javier Torre, Minister of Social Development of Chile, Jose Manuel Salazar, Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission of Latin America, Mrs. Rooks, the UNDP UN resident in Brazil, and the president also of the SERPRO, our host, Dr. Arenas, and colleagues from ECLAC, and dear ministers and high authorities, representative of the diplomatic corps, academies, civil society, regional directors, representatives and colleagues of UNDP programs, especially Claudia Provida, representative of UNDP in Brazil. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to speak to you at the opening of the 6th Regional Conference on Social Development and the 17th Ministerial Forum for Latin America and the Caribbean. I would begin by thanking the government of Brazil for its hospitality and central role in this forum, which is fundamental for dialogue on progress in inclusive social development in Latin America and the Caribbean. We are meeting in a challenging moment. Latin America and the Caribbean are facing many interlinked pressures. We are all aware of this. Our economic growth is still positive, but it is low and fragile. We have many possibilities that are threatening social inclusion for millions of people. The climate crisis is manifest not in heat waves, floods, and others that affect the stability of our democratic institutions. These pressures, though, are not isolated. They interact with each other with many effects, putting at risk the progress of human development and victories in recent decades. Given that reality, social development is part of our proposal. Social policies, and especially, as Minister Toro said, the systems of social protection have been very motivating in times of crisis and help to project towards growth of our societies. We saw that during the pandemic when the emergency measures protected many families, when public policies avoided many families from entering into extreme poverty. Now, with rapid technological progress, we need social networks that accompany people towards new forms of labor and inclusion. Sustainable growth is not just a slogan; it is a way to grow forward. And what is happening today in Brazil shows it as a pioneer in social policies. They have taken millions of people out of poverty and adopted in many other countries of the region and the world. And now we must innovate once again. We have made great progress in reducing policy, but we must avoid setbacks and consolidate stable, protected middle classes. We have been less successful in showing the way for young people to feel optimistic about their future, to feel recognized as protagonists for change, as active agents for a better world. And in these conferences, what you build will be key for the coming decade's agenda. I have 3 priorities to mention for regional dialogue. First, the importance of social protection that must build roots in our societies. It's not just to have more coverage. The systems must be flexible, face risks, and be able to promote well-being for the many different classes. And second, coordinated social policies. They cannot be fragmented. We need strong, coordinated institutions and connecting employment, health, housing, and healthcare policies. Third, sustainable and innovative financing, and we must make progress to more progressive mechanisms that are innovative in new forms of taxes and social investment for investment over time. And then Human Development 2025, UNDP is about to publish. It demands that human development be the key center of our efforts, to be able to resist and also to come out in front of the international crises. In social terms, this means that families be able to face crisis without falling into poverty, and to be able to face extreme climate events, that young people have access to education and employment, and that women be able to have the unfair burden of home care. And we need more technical reflections as well, have a technical contributions, because no country can confront the challenges we face. The regional value chains are important. The climate crisis goes beyond crises, goes beyond national borders, and we need more international cooperation, share experiences, and advance toward common inclusive development. Latin America and the Caribbean have tremendous potential, human, cultural, and natural potentials. We have diversity, social innovation, and if we're able to advance with social policies and strengthen the cooperation amongst our countries and bet on more inclusive institutions, then we can turn today's opportunities into victories. Then, in looking at evidence and technical support, giving Your Excellencies, colleagues, the 6th Regional Conference on Social Development and the 17th Ministerial Forum for Development in Latin America and the Caribbean are a turning point where Brasilia can send a clear message that we can innovate for a better, more inclusive future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Manuela. At this time, the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Brazil now has the floor, Ms. Sylvia Rooks. Good morning, one and all. I'd like to congratulate the Minister for Social Assistance, Family Affairs, and the Fight Against Hunger of Brazil, Mr. Diaz, a long-standing partner of the United Nations in Brazil. Likewise, may I extend my greetings to our host, the President of SERPRO, Mr. Alexandre Morin. Thank you so much. And since we are in Brazil, and before top-ranking government authorities in Brazil, I will address you in Portuguese, but if the minister allows me, I'd like to continue with my greetings in Spanish. Greetings to the Minister of Social Development and Family Affairs of Chile, Ms. Javier, or rather Ms. Javiera Toro. I would also like to greet my dear friends from the United Nations of Brazil, Alberto, Luis, regional directors and colleagues with the UNCT, Almudena Fernandes, chief economist for the UNDP program for Latin America and the Caribbean. It gives me great pleasure to see you again. Very especially Mr. Jose Manuel Salazar, Executive Secretary of ECLAC, whom I would like to thank for the invitation, as well as for the opportunity to address you today. I would also like to greet other government authorities, as well as government representatives, members of the Brazilian government, as well as the United Nations teams attending this event. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to take part in the opening session of this event, representing the 25% expert agencies, funds, and programs of the United Nations in Brazil. It is a particularly important occasion where we revisit the lessons learned from the first World Summit on Social Development held 30 years ago. It is also an occasion for us to think about the pathway we have followed since then, as well as the lingering challenges. I'd like to welcome the document that will be presented to us today, a document that invites us to move towards a covenant, a pact towards a truly inclusive social development. It is a much needed and timely call, especially in the current situation in Latin America and the Caribbean, where we see persistent structural inequalities at different levels, but still significant levels in terms of the overall weakness of social cohesion. The topics that mark this conference include poverty, hunger, labor, healthcare, education, which remains very much key and central to the region. And it is really positive that we are here in a position to revisit progress and challenges in light of these debates. In the case of Brazil, not only the Brazilian government but also the United Nations system have significant experiences to share. The social protection system in place in Brazil, which Minister Diaz knows all too well, has been consolidated in the 21st century as an example of multi-sectoral approach to overcome the key overarching social development challenges. By means of interconnected and complementary policies and actions, Brazil has succeeded in lifting millions of people out of poverty while ensuring food and nutritional security for its population, for her population. With that, Brazil has again exited the hunger map according to FAO indicators. On the labor dimension, Brazil currently posts one of the lowest ever unemployment rates, which does not mean that all problems have been solved. Much on the contrary, far from that. However, the foundation is there for Brazil to take leaps, even higher leaps, towards and more ambitious forms of social inclusion and equality. The cooperation between the UN and Brazil has been consolidated in the framework of cooperation signed in 2023 and which will be in effect until 2027. It structures our joint action around strategic priorities for Brazil in line with the government's multi-year plan as well as the 2030 agenda. Based on that structuring framework, we have supported key government actions in critical areas for social development, including, for instance, the ecological or green transformation plan, which seeks to couple green transition with production oriented inclusion and reduction of inequalities, as well as the national care policy, very much essential for gender equality and also for the recognition of reproductive labor or work and for social protection in a more comprehensive light. May I also highlight another action that is in line with social resilience and protection, particularly the response to the climate emergency in Rio Grande do Sul last year. Because of its institutional capabilities, Brazil, generally speaking, does not require UN support for a localized crisis. However, given the vastness and the impact of the floods in Brazil's southernmost state, the support from the United Nations was key, not only during the emergency in providing urgent assistance to the hardest hit persons, but also and mainly for planning for recovery and reconstruction in the region. ECLAC performed an essential role in this process by leading the assessment methodology involving losses and damages as conducted with the participation of 9 UN agencies together with the World Bank, the IDB, and also in coordination with the 3 different spheres of government. As we can see from these examples, national efforts directly talk to the discussions we're going to be holding here on social protection, care, healthcare, education, and resiliency, showing quite clearly that the regional and global agendas will only make sense if they are deeply anchored on concrete and transformative policies at the local level, at the territories themselves. The fact is that in the next few days we will have many subject matter experts addressing these issues. Therefore, what I would really like to do in my brief introductory remarks is to call your attention to the emerging challenges for inclusive social development. We find ourselves before deep-rooted changes, climate changes, demographic and technology changes, which reshape the horizons in our societies. Furthermore, we are living through important transformations in the multilateral system, precisely at a point in time where, after the pandemic, we believed we were resuming the path towards international cooperation in a more solid and coordinated lines, ultimately anchored on efforts to reduce inequality. How can we actually make progress in implementing sustainable development goals given the above? How can we as a region respond to the labor inclusion demands as well as the climate urgencies and the technological acceleration as well as the demographic changes that challenge our social protection systems? These are all very central questions in our agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, social development is above all a political issue. It requires brave decisions, comprehensive pacts, and renewed commitments between governments, civil society, and the private sector, as well as international organizations. Latin America and the Caribbean have shown on different occasions in its history the ability to truly build a creative and solidarity based responses in view of crises. Today, more than ever before, we must mobilize this capability and ability to the service of a shared regional approach to place people at the very center of the agenda so as to ensure that no one will be left behind. More than that, we need the force available in the region to prompt the world to take on this collective commitment. On behalf of the UN system in Brazil, may I reaffirm our commitment to actively contribute to this effort. We strongly believe that this conference will be an opportunity for us to reaffirm our shared mission while strengthening the bridges between and among countries, governments, and communities towards a more fair, more inclusive, and more sustainable future for everyone. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank you so much, Madam, for your kind remarks. And now the Executive Secretariat of ECWAC, Mr. Salazar, will be addressing the audience. Good morning, one and all. Dear Minister of Social Development, Family Affairs, and the Fight Against Hunger of Brazil, Mr. Diaz, dear Ms. Toro, Minister of Social Affairs from Chile, Ms. Rooks, the United Nations System Coordinator in Brazil, dear Fernandez, Chief Economist of the Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean with the UNDP, dear Mr. Alexander Gonzalez de Morin, President of the Federal Service for Data Processing Services in Serpro, Brazil, dear ministers, cabinet ministers, and high-ranking government officials attending this ECOLOC event, dear representatives of the United Nations, and also dear friends from civil society today. I wish you all a very cordial welcome to this regional conference on social development for Latin America and the Caribbean, the 7th Ministerial Forum. I regret I am unable to be with you in person in this important event, but I do believe that you are quite certain about the fact that this meeting offers a unique opportunity for us to propose and promote a new pact towards social and inclusive pact leading up to the upcoming global summit or world summit to be held in Qatar in a few more months. It has been 10 years ever since we held in Lima the regional conference on social development for Latin America and the Caribbean, established by mandate of the ECLOC and ECOSOC member countries, ECOSOC being the UN Economic and Social Council. Over the past 10 years, this space has become a conference in the best sense of the word or term, a community for exchange of practices where authorities, international organizations, members of academia, and of civil society bring or come together to discuss poverty, inequality, and structural gaps. Since 2019, it has overseen implementation of the regional agenda for inclusive social development approved in Mexico during the third meeting of this conference. Throughout its 5 previous meetings, our conference has focused on issues such as social institutions, universal, comprehensive, sustainable, and resilient social protection, especially in the face of disasters. And in the wake of the pandemic, we have focused on recovery and efforts to tackle inequality with sustainability. This occasion in 2025 is particularly significant for several reasons that I would like to highlight. Firstly, because we are meeting on the eve, and as we all know, we are meeting on the eve of the Second World Summit on Social Development to be held in November in the city of Doha, Qatar. Following the mandate received in Santiago in 2023, this is a timely occasion for us to discuss the role and the position to be taken on by the region, and also how the region's voice can be heard in the World Summit with the perspective of you, people like ministers and senior social development authorities. 3 decades in 1995, the world gathered in Copenhagen to place social development at the very center of the international agenda. The declaration of that first World Summit highlighted a political, economic, and ethical vision for social development. I would like to quote a paragraph from that declaration that says that the vision is based on, and I quote, on human dignity, human rights, equality, respect, peace, democracy, mutual responsibility and cooperation, as well as on the full respect for the diverse religious and ethnical values and the cultural origins of people. End of quotation. End of quote. Since then, this broad vision has been incorporated first into the Millennium Development Goals and then into the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN 2030 Agenda, an agenda that countries of the region have been working on and have done so continuously. Quite certainly, 30 years is a very long time, and the world has changed substantially since then. Geoeconomic, geopolitical, demographic, technological, environmental changes, to name just a few. In certain ways, the world has changed for the better, in other aspects, with trends that pose new challenges, but then again, also new opportunities. Which brings me to a second reason why this meeting is so significant and timely. That is the fact that we are in the midst of a transition from an international order as we know it or knew it today, governed by commonly accepted rules and governed by the understanding that the large powers or great powers recognized in these rules certain limits to the unilateral exercise of their undoubted economic, political, and military power. A transition towards a new world where power seems to prevail over rules and where multilateral action and the bodies responsible for supporting multilateral coordination are increasingly being called into question. I do not wish to delve deep into this, but neither can we proceed with the discussion of inclusive social development without recognizing the new realities around us and without analyzing what these new realities may imply and mean for international commitments and cooperation, including as regards funding for development. And the third reason that makes this a very special moment in time is the fact that we see a combination of new technological, demographic, and environmental trends with the new global geopolitical and geoeconomic conditions. This makes this a very timely moment for us to rethink development paradigms in general and also social development paradigms in particular. At ECLAC, we have insisted on the need to rethink our strategies for economic, social, and environmental transformation. And also, we have stressed the need to rethink our welfare states. The multiple simultaneous crises, geopolitical, economic, social, climatic, and technological crises, have deepened the pre-existing inequalities and threatened to slow down the progress achieved so far. In particular, we have identified three development traps that limit progress in the region. Number one, low capacity for growth. Number two, high inequality, low social mobility, and weak social cohesion. And number three, low institutional capacity and ineffective governance. These development traps are interrelated between themselves or among themselves, and they are also interdependent. For instance, we remain the world's most unequal region, and as is widely accepted and supported by evidence today, inequality hinders on economic and employment growth, and also is corrosive to social cohesion. In turn, the trap of low capacity for growth, which has led us to a second last decade in terms of growth, poverty, and reduction, and the creation of a formal and decent unemployment, thereby placing a burden on social policies that social policies alone will find difficult to resolve. This is because high and sustained growth rates are necessary to create jobs, thereby raising the income of the population and then creating the tax revenues needed to finance the necessary social investments. It will be difficult to move the needle on the economic growth as well as social, educational, and health policies without strong institutions with the technical, operational, political, forward-looking capabilities to manage these transformations. In this context, at ICLAC, we have been focusing not only on what to do but also on how to do. In other words, how to manage the transformations that are essential to overcome the pitfalls of development. In the social sphere, as mentioned yesterday, this raises the question of how social institutions can strengthen and consolidate their capabilities, technical capabilities to carry out or undertake transformative actions and achieve structural changes. In this regard, we must recognize that having a regional agenda for inclusive social development, as achieved through these conferences, is a major step forward. Among its main pillars are the consolidation of solid social institutions, universal, comprehensive, sustainable, and resilient social protection, quality social and labor inclusion policies, and cooperation and integration in social matters as primary instruments. Reaffirming these commitments will certainly be one of the important achievements of this conference. At ECLAC, we have been working with all of you, hand in hand with other United Nations agencies, to develop a vision and concrete proposals for the region leading up to the Second World Summit on Social Development. 10 proposals have been identified, and they could perhaps be the subject of this renewed global compact. The proposals include eradication of poverty and hunger, reduction of inequality, expansion of universal comprehensive, sustainable social protection, promotion of digital protection, promotion of gender inequality and care systems, strengthening labor inclusion in the context of productive transformation, investing in education as an instrument for social mobility, transforming healthcare systems to achieve universal health coverage, consolidating pension systems in the field or in face of accelerated aging, as well as mobilizing funds and multilateral cooperations. This is just a short list of the 10 large areas that we have proposed as part of a comprehensive package and vision for the future in terms of action today. This pact for inclusive social development must be firmly aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, which will certainly be addressed at the Summit of the Future. Today at noon, at 12 o'clock, we will present a position document for Latin America and Caribbean 30 years after the Social Development Summit in Copenhagen towards a global social pact and inclusive social development. These topics will be addressed in greater detail at noon today. In conclusion, I'd like to voice my thanks very sincerely to all of you who have made it possible for us to meet this morning. Many thanks to the government of Chile, particularly the Minister for Development and Family Affairs of Chile, Ms. Toro, and her professional team for her great leadership and ongoing support in her role as the outgoing chair of this regional conference. Her work has been key to the follow-up and progress of the work and the organization and preparation of this sixth meeting. Many thanks to the government of the Federative Republic of Brazil for its hospitality, collaboration in organizing this event. Especially, we are very thankful to Minister Diaz, who today will take on the presidency of this conference for 2025 through 2027. With the tremendous collaboration of his technical teams, we have been able to very successfully organize this sixth meeting. Thank you so much, meeting. You have been very committed, and we remain very committed to supporting you and your work in the next few years. I'd also like to thank Humberto Arenas, Director at the CLAC for Social Development, and for his team for outstanding efforts in preparing this conference and the many preparatory activities leading up to the Social Summit in Qatar. Without further ado, I wish you 3 very successful days of work and reflection. I am sure that this will be the case and that the lessons and commitments that will emerge here will be very useful in continuing to build transformative social policies and a more productive, more inclusive, and sustainable future in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the Executive Secretary for his words. We now have a particular challenge, namely to take a group picture. That's one of the biggest challenges in any conference. It will be outside this room for the heads of delegation. The rest of us will take a break and we'll be back at 11 sharp to go on with our work. Good morning. I ask your attention. We'll continue now with our work at this conference. First of all, we will be electing the chairperson of this conference on social development in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's a tradition at ECLAC that we, at each of our meetings, that the host country take on the chairmanship of the meeting and the leadership of the conference's proceedings for the next 2 years. Nonetheless, we have to consult and confirm that with the delegations. If we agree to accept the Minister of Social Development and Family in Brazil, Mr. Wellington Dias, as the chairman of this regional conference. Do we agree? Having that authority over the meeting, I give the floor to our chair for the rest of the meeting. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, delegates, I am very thankful for the confidence given this moment in Brazil, and as the chairman of this conference, I have participated in many elections. I've been a city councilman in Teresina, my home city. I was a member of the state assembly in the capital city there, federal member of Congress, and I was senator and governor, senator again. But this election was the easiest one of all. And first of all, I want to thank our dear Javiera Toro. We're very thankful, all of us, for Chile's chairmanship, under which we all saw how that she carried out very dedicated work and successful. A round of applause for her and her whole staff, who has led us so well so far. And now I submit to approval the provisional agenda that the Secretariat has drawn up for this meeting in consultation with the chair. And you have with you the document that's entitled the Provisional Program, which I present for consideration of all. If there are no comments, I consider it has been approved. Thank you very much. And now I call on Minister Javiera Toro, Minister of Social Development in Chile, to present the report of the outgoing presidency on the activities carried out since the 5th meeting of the Regional Conference on Social Development of Latin America and the Caribbean. I'll give the floor to our dear Minister. Thank you very much, Minister. And Mr. Chairman, I congratulate you for this new post that you are taking on. It's an honor for the government of Chile, and in particular for me as Minister of Social Development and Families, to be here with you in my last activity as outgoing chair of the Regional Conference on Social Development in Latin America and the Caribbean. We took on this role in Santiago in October 2023 with the great responsibility and enthusiasm, and with the hope of working through dialogue on an agenda for social development in our region. So at the end of that presidency and going into the Second World Summit from Latin America and the Caribbean, we have a joint message for inclusive social development worldwide. That pact considers public policies for social and labor, education, and quality health inclusion, housing, basic services, and care services, together with social security that are integral, universal, sustainable, and resilient. And I share with you the report on the activities carried out and the achievements during the period of 2023 to 2025 when Chile was chairing this conference. First of all, in October of 2023, we had the 25th regional meeting of Latin America and the Caribbean in Santiago, Chile, with the participation of 108 delegates from 18 countries in the region and representatives of the United Nations, financial institutions, development banks, cooperation agencies, civil society, and academy. At that time, we looked at the ECLAC document on social inclusion in Latin America and the Caribbean, which was the key for inclusive social development. It showed progress and challenges to strengthen institutions socially and better quality of public policies for social development. In addition, there were agreements that in the fifth resolution highlighting that Chile took on the chairmanship of the Regional Conference on Social Development, and we defined the vice presidencies of the following countries: Argentina, Barbados, Brazil, Costa Rica, Panama, and Venezuela. In second place, EXAC was requested to give technical assistance to the working groups on policies identified by countries as greatest urgently, emphasizing a regional working group on social records and intensifying analysis and understanding of policies and standards for finance, for solid social institutions and effective governance. ECLAC was also requested to develop a roadmap document for the sixth meeting of the regional conference that was held in Barbados in late October 2024, and to bring the region to the Second World Summit in Qatar in November this year, 2025. Later, on April 15, 2024, extraordinary meeting of the Executive Board was held to develop an initial agenda on the working groups and documents requested based on a request from ECLAC and this presidency. 4 working groups were set up on cooperative framework groups, natural resources in the Caribbean, and social records and standards for spending and non-contributive spending and support. That we had representatives of the Ministries of Social Development of Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Belize, Brazil, Chile, Costa Rica, Grenada, Jamaica, Guyana, Panama, Grenadines, and Suriname and Uruguay, and several autonomous Anguilla, Curaçao, and the Virgin Islands, Montserrat, and Turks and Caicos. These groups met periodically to feed into discussions in the document prepared by the Secretariat for the 6th board meeting. In October 2024, we held the 6th meeting of the board of the Regional Conference in the framework of the 16th Ministerial Meeting on Latin America and Caribbean, organized by the UNDP with ECLAC in Barbados. At that time, ECLAC, together with this chair, presented a document on reducing inequality and for more inclusive social development in Latin America and the Caribbean, with messages for the Second World Summit. At that meeting, they recognized that given the major changes, crises, and conflicts underway, the Second World Summit on Social Development is a fundamental uh, milestone to analyze the changes to in the need for greater social cohesion and change. With the other working groups from the conference, with the coming out of the sixth board meeting, two new groups were created on labor inclusion and the second on records and social information. After the Barbados meeting, this chair, and coordinating with our friends in Brazil through the Ministry of Social Development and Family and Fighting Against Hunger, we worked on the implementation of a roadmap agreed to at that sixth board meeting to disseminate the messages from our region mentioned above for the Second World Summit, the preparatory region, and also to feed into this second regional meeting. So in February 2025, with support from ECLAC, we had proposals prepared by the Ministry of Social Development in the 63rd meeting of the Social Development of the United Nations. And that meeting was held in an interactive panel development with senior members of UN system in a in-person meeting in New York. And then on February 2nd, Chile, as chair of this conference in New York, had a meeting with the countries that are members of the Social Development Commission that represent Latin America and the Caribbean, and with the countries that are members of the board of this regional conference. That meeting was held with the participation of the Secretary of Social Services authorities from the ministry that I represent at this in the 73rd meeting of the region. And the objective was to report on the roadmap progress and development in the region, preparing for the Second World Summit. Later, on March 24th, 2025, we had the second meeting, extraordinary meeting of the board of the Social Development Conference to analyze the proposal and priorities and messages from Latin America and the Caribbean for the Second World Summit on Social Development in a virtual meeting. And then, based on that document, Latin America and the Caribbean, given the Second World meeting on proposed for inclusive social development developed by the Secretariat with the help of ECLAC. And in May 2025, the extraordinary board meeting made a presentation in the Forum of Latin America and Caribbean meetings on sustainable development in a person-to-person meeting in Santiago. And we sent a letter to the countries that facilitating the summit in Morocco with the regional messages and messages of the ministries towards the Qatar meeting. Regarding the working groups for the conference, during this year, we would highlight the promotion of labor inclusion through social promotion with dialogue, cooperation, and exchange of learning and good practices in terms of labor inclusion and social protection, and with more protective policies for social and labor development. From April to September 2025, we developed work to organize for this sixth meeting regional conference on social development in Latin America and the Caribbean, highlighting from 24 to 26 of June in the fifth regional seminar on regional social development held by ECLAC in Santiago, a high-level panel on the Second World Summit with this chair, the government of Barbados, the Undersecretary of Economic and Social Affairs of the United Nations, and the permanent representative of Belgium to the United Nations as co-facilitator of the Second World Summit. and in the name of and also the Morocco's permanent representative to the UN. Also, as part of that regional seminar, ECLAC had a high-level gathering towards the Second World Summit on Regional Development Issues, Inclusive Issues, and other regional organizations and the UN's UNESCO, where each of the countries talked about their commitments and part of the World Framework on Development Socialization, highlighting the solutions of countries from Latin America towards that summit. Finally, during the recent months, the Secretariat has been working on preparing the position document Latin America and the Caribbean 30 years after the World Summit on Social Development towards a pact for inclusive social development, which will be presented today. Before I conclude, I want to take these final seconds for a brief reflection. In the year when we brought together the countries of the world to discuss social development, 30 years after the first summit in Copenhagen, our contribution from Latin America and Caribbean to the global solution shows that we have to rethink multilateral actions, and the summit in Qatar will be fundamental. We have a chance to build a new world agreement on overcoming policy for inclusion and generate new development and social protection models. So I invite you to reimagine development and to transform welfare indicators. In a challenge in our day-to-day lives is that we have to take greater care with development, where social development should be considered a strategic investment with the early childhood, less dependence of elderly, mental health, and taking care of people, that not just reducing inequality but increasing capacities for consumption and entrepreneurship. And this is a commitment to social development. When a country develops, it's progress for all. We exchange experience and increase the dignity of our populations. The greatness of our country is measured by our capacity to measure prosperity and dignity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam, for the report and also the leadership of the conference in the previous period. At this time, on the way to the Second World Summit on Social Development, dear delegates, it is my pleasure to introduce and share with you a video message sent by Mr. Li Shuhua, Assistant Secretary General for Social Affairs with the United Nations. The video clip now, please.
Development. At the outset, I just want to extend my sincere thanks to my good colleague, Hussein Manua, Executive Secretary for the ECLAC, for inviting me to share this message with you. The Second World Summit for Social Development will be convened in Doha in the coming November, 30 years after the first summit held in Copenhagen. I'm very honored to lead my department, UNDESA, to provide support to this landmarking event. The journey to the WSSD2 is very much rooted in decades of multilateral efforts to prioritize human well-being, equity, and inclusion. In 1995, governments adopted the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development. and its program of action, committing to eradicate poverty, achieve full employment, and promote social integration. A series of the UN summits and high-level meetings reinforced these goals, including the Millennium Summit in 2000 and the Rio +20 conference in 2012. Since the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 goals, 2 summits on SDGs were held respectively in 2019 and 2023, followed by the Summit of the Future in 2024, and most recently convened the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development. All this set the stage for renewed global commitments, emphasizing social justice and inclusive development. They highlight the important work of the United Nations as a system in advancing sustainable development, with the human well-being at the very heart of the development. In this regard, the contributions of the entire UN system, especially including the ECLAC, are greatly valued and appreciated. The upcoming summit in Doha will seek to evaluate the progress achieved since Copenhagen and define the new strategies to address the current social development challenges. Indeed, despite the significant progress, problems such as poverty, inequality, and social exclusion persist in the context of the global crisis and accelerated changes. High levels of the informal employment and the weak social protection coverage leave many behind, despite the pledge to reach the furthest behind the first. This summit will be a key opportunity to strengthen our commitment to the lasting solutions. Latin America and the Caribbean, a region with a very rich history of the social innovation, has a pivotal role to play. Your leadership and experience and insights are essential in aligning policy priorities with deliberations and outcomes of the summit. I strongly encourage your governments to participate at the highest levels in the forthcoming summit. I'd also urge you, together with the employers and the workers' organizations, civil society partners, organizations of the persons with disabilities, youth, indigenous peoples, and of course the people of African descent, and the other stakeholders, to showcase successful social development initiatives at the solution sessions to be held during the summit. In closing, I wish you a very fruitful discussion and very much look forward to your contributions to building a more inclusive and equitable world. Thank you.
Agradecendo as palavras, agora tenho o prazer de passar a palavra ao nosso querido Alberto Arenas de Mesa, diretor da Divisão de Desenvolvimento Social do CEPAL, para a apresentação do documento América Latina e o Caribe há 30 anos da Cúpula Mundial sobre o Desenvolvimento Social, rumo a um Pacto Mundial para o Desenvolvimento Social Inclusivo, preparado pela Secretaria para esta conferência. Com a palavra, nosso querido Alberto Arenas.
Muito obrigado. Sim, se escucha. Perfecto. Bom dia a todas y todos y sean bienvenidos a sexta reunión de la Conferencia Regional sobre Desenvolvimiento
social development of ECLAC. It gives me great pleasure to be here with you all in Brasilia. Special greetings to Minister Wellington Diaz and all of his staff members. Thank you so much for the warm reception in this wonderful city. I will now shift on to Spanish. I did have a very good Portuguese teacher, but I didn't really learn that much. Anyway, good morning, Mr. Minister Diaz, Minister for Social Development, Family Affairs and the Fight Against Hunger of Brazil, Minister Toro for Social Development and Family Affairs of Chile, Ms. Almoneda Fernandez, Chief Economist of UNDP for Latin America and the Caribbean, Rignani's Commission Secretary, and greetings likewise to all cabinet ministers for social development from sister organizations and related authorities who have joined us in this sixth meeting of the Regional Conference on Sustainable or rather Social Development in Latin America and the Caribbean. As the Minister mentioned, this morning I will show you or share with you this position document, which I understand all of you got a copy of. A version is available in Spanish as well as in English. And we at ECLAC prepared this document firsthand. I want to thank the editorial and publishing teams at ECLAC for providing us with an executive summary in Portuguese, especially dedicated to the minister and all of the Brazilian team members. I'm going to break the protocol rules to voice my special thanks to the entire team for the work conducted not only in bringing the event to fruition but also in preparing this document. The team has coordinated efforts, and it was coordinated by Rodrigo Martinez. After a long journey working at ECLAC, 32 years working at ECLAC to be more precise, this conference will mark his last regional conference. So let's give him a round of applause, shall we? All right. We will be talking about Latin America and the Caribbean. 30 years from the World Summit for Social Development towards a global pact for inclusive social development. Minister Toro spoke about what has happened over the past 2 years, and we thought we would share with you some of the resolutions adopted in the recent past. In Santiago 2023, for example, the presiding officers met in a forum, as well as in Barbados in 2024. In 2023 already, we began to identify and address policy alternatives. And may I highlight also funding standards, financing standards for socially oriented investments, especially non-contributory systems. A mandate given to us by the Secretariat to ECLAC. We also developed a map, a roadmap, to get to this sixth meeting with a document at hand, and also get to the World Summit to be held in 2025 with a tangible proposal. In Barbados, the chair of the presidency requested us to develop or draft a document which was later shared in a presiding officer's roundtable in March and then later on by the minister, reflecting the region's voice leading up to the second World Summit on Social Development. So what was that roadmap? The roadmap took place between October 2024 till November 2025. We started working in Barbados with that document, and then we came to Brazil. The Brazilian government provided us with the social component on inequality, and we kept on working with the 5 regional commissions in Latin America, which delivered us their report leading up to the summit early in January this year. We also attended the 63 session on social development held in New York. We also attended the Barbados meeting as part of the special meeting of the presiding officers convened in October, where we submitted the document. And we came to this document you have at hand, as well as yet another very special document at the ECLEC, reflecting the Pact for Social Inclusive Social Development. Especially considering the upcoming Qatar conference and also the recent meeting in Haiti. A few months ago, we held a seminar on inequality in Guatemala. And I think it is fair to say that it's, on the occasion of the 6th regional meeting or regional conference on social development, where we submit this document, I think this is perhaps the last station, if you will, or stop point before the Assembly General to be held in the next few weeks, and also considering what will take place in Barbados a few weeks from now. The document you have at hand has a 10-page executive summary, which can be very easily read. Microphone, please. Microphone, please. It contains all of the messages from the different social development ministries leading up to the World Summit towards an inclusive social development pact, which is then followed by conclusions. As part of the background, reference is made to the critical importance and strategic opportunity of the Second World Summit for Social Development. And this is due to the fact that in 1995 in Copenhagen, 30 years ago, basically the world and the region have substantially changed over the past 3 decades. We have seen substantial progress in social care or services and the fight against poverty. But we still do have very substantial challenges, persisting challenges in all countries. There are also structural gaps in achieving inclusive social development. The region faces a confluence of crises, geopolitical, social, healthcare, economic, environmental. There are also global transformations underway, technology, climate, demographic changes. And quite certainly there are new forms of violence and processes that represent both opportunities but also major challenges. The Second World Summit on Social Development is a unique opportunity for the region, where we will be able to underscore the importance of people-centered development and also address existing inequalities and gaps. We will also be able to share progress and highlight challenges in the social arena, as well as identify opportunities and areas for cooperation agreements, essentially highlighting the urgent needs and set priorities on our way to Qatar. Here's a flowchart reflecting what happened in the past few years in the social agenda, where you see a substantial number of events in the UN system, as well as events related to social development and other events that are, let's say, more attached to social development or inclusive social development issues. The Earth Summit, for example, held back in 1992 in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. It's been quite a while. This is a debate that has been going on for quite some time regarding the role of stakeholders. Let me highlight 4 key landmarks or milestones over the past few years. Number 1, the World Summit on Social Development held in 1995 in Copenhagen, as mentioned earlier, which was key, of course, to help foster people's needs, etc. And then a 10-point action plan and commitment was established, and Copenhagen places social development at the very center of the debate. And that proved to be a very substantial development and achievement in terms of social development in the world. The second landmark event was the Millennium Summit, and we were able to address all of the inequalities among different countries, and 8 different Millennium Development Goals were established as part of a very broad, comprehensive, and multifaceted agenda. In 2015, the Sustainable Development Agenda and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In 2025, we essentially adopted a more comprehensive, wholesome vision to development, multiple dimensions, including the economic, the social, the environmental dimensions, thereby essentially expanding the scope of the social agenda and identifying 17 sustainable developments, of which 8 are or were directly related to the social dimension of development. So poverty was given central stage or a central position, as well as hunger, the SDG 2, as well as, of course, inequality, as indicated in SDG 10. The fourth landmark event has to do with the Regional Conference on Social Development. This is our sixth regional conference. In our third meeting held in the city of Mexico, in Mexico City, countries agreed on a regional agenda for social development, inclusive social development. An agenda that has 4 key pillars and 56 action policies that were passed by member countries or ECLAC member countries, and essentially placed at the very center of the debate the inclusive social development proposals with a very concrete agenda and proposals for the region. The document sets forth a development strategy to move towards inclusive social development. One of the definitions places people at the very center of the agenda, people and their entitlements or rights. And the focus was aimed at enabling a poverty, hunger, inequality-free pathway where essentially one can enjoy guarantees and one's full exercise of one's social, economic, cultural rights, as well as labor rights. Of course, there are problems in that social development strategy, yes, indeed. But the fact is that many gaps and many dimensions were the emerging challenge, which, in one way or another, lead us to redouble our efforts on social development matters. Let's see now how these matters have evolved over the past 30 years. It would take too long, of course, to explain each of them, but let us focus on the key aspects. Over the past 30 years, poverty has been reduced by almost half, and extreme poverty has been reduced by almost 1/3. When you see on this ECLAC chart for 1995, and we compare that vis-a-vis with 2024, essentially 30 years, so the incidence of poverty went down from 48.4% down to 26.8%. And the population at poverty went down from 215 to 170 million in 2024, a substantial drop. Incidence of extreme poverty went from 14% to 10%, and the number of people living in extreme poverty increased from 64 million to 66 million. The second topic to be highlighted here has to do with hunger. More than 1/4 of the population in Latin America and the Caribbean suffered from food insecurity. The largest food, or the world's largest food exporting region, experiences this contradiction. It is the largest food exporting region in the world, but still we are home to almost 1/4 of people who suffer from food insecurity. 28.3% of people, as you can see in the blue line on this chart, the bar chart. The bars, of course, plot the population with approximately 188 million people. The regional transition is a very important regional transition. People suffering from chronic malnutrition, children under age 5, 11.5% suffering with chronic malnutrition and 8.6% with overweight or obesity. The high level of inequality is one of the traps for inclusive social development in the region, as mentioned by the ECLAC Executive Secretariat. Inequality or income inequality, as shown on the chart, has indeed declined in the region, but unfortunately, when you look at the region, Latin America and the Caribbean on the chart, that's the blue line. And over the past 30 years, the blue line has been the highest, or shown the highest, inequality, income inequality in the world. And this is indeed a historic structuring issue. And it is certainly a multidimensional topic, social inequality. And that is why we have proposed that just as we have made progress in our multi-dimensional understanding of poverty, we should likewise adopt a multidimensional approach to inequality. And why is it so important to make progress in the multidimensional understanding of social inequality? Well, we know inequalities is historic, multidimensional, and structuring. Multidimensional meaning that different causes, several different causes explain inequality. And for that reason, we need an instrument or tool that will not only measure income, but mostly income inequality. Usually, the indicator we use to determine whether you will have low, high, or what requires a better understanding and using a tool that will look at society in its several different dimensions so as to provide us with multidimensional information and therefore allow people to design and put in place comprehensive policies, cross-cutting policies involving education services, healthcare, housing, labor, and therefore also overcome informal labor and also address people of African descent and people suffering with disabilities. So addressing inequality is a huge task which requires different tools. And one of these tools, of course, is the multidimensional understanding or measurement of poverty to support implementation of comprehensive policies. The social or inclusive social development strategy has a backbone. And the backbone here are the social protection systems, which have made some progress over the past 20, 30 years, as shown in the document. In the 20th century, social protection systems were marked by low levels of coverage, stratification, and exclusion, with access to non-contributory benefits limited to formal workers only. Social development institutions, as regards highly vulnerable populations, as you know, there was a transition in the 1990s from social investment funds towards cash transfers, especially from the social development ministries or equivalent institutions in each country. Cash transfers to the most vulnerable segments of the population. And in the 21st century, there has been a significant expansion in social protection systems. I mean, the features of the social protection systems include universal coverage, comprehensive, sustainable, and resilient systems, where also, according to the current social protection framework, including comprehensive care policies, as very aptly led by Minister Toro in Chile. And in this conference, we will certainly dedicate a panel session to this topic tomorrow. Likewise, there has been a very significant strengthening in the 21st century of the non-contributory component. We will be talking about that a little later today. And essentially, something very important took place. We went from an approach, a targeting approach, towards a more universal approach. In other words, including the vulnerable groups as well, and the middle class groups as well as the concept of universal coverage, despite differences. Not to mention, of course, the very important coverage challenges. The third topic to be highlighted here in social protection is about social or institutional frameworks. Social development ministries and the equivalent institutions in the region can be found in virtually all countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. Only 4 countries in the region today do not have such an institutional framework at a ministerial level. All other countries have introduced reforms to expand and improve their institutional framework and also attach a management component to the strategic and inclusive social development agenda. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, of course, had a very substantial impact, a very positive effect. I can keep talking, but it would be good if the screen could also, if you could also flip the screen. Well, it went too far. Anyway, it happens in the very best families, no worries. I'm sorry, apologies. So, let me now go back to something I mentioned earlier. In other words, what was the consensus? What kind of consensus has been reached as part of the messages from the social development ministries of Latin America and the Caribbean? Well, we have three different documents of interest. Number one, the document we submitted in Barbados. And then the second document was submitted to the presiding officers in March during a forum session. And the forum session, of course, was presented by Minister Toro. And the third document is the one we're presenting today on the occasion of the sixth regional conference. The consensus took place in four different dimensions. Number one, to fight hunger, poverty, and also fighting inequality, poverty, hunger, priority for the region. Number two, social protection systems, comprehensive care policies, and quality public policies so as to leave no one behind. Third, proposal action for inclusive social development in Latin America and the Caribbean. Number four, towards a global pact for inclusive social development. Point number one essentially listed the priority objectives or goals for us to achieve sustainable social development, such as overcoming inequality, poverty, and hunger. In this context, reference is made to welfare gaps and also gaps in access to social rights as well as political rights, and also emerging gaps regarding climate change and the aging of the population and migration, as well as to organized crime and technology transformation. The second point placed the emphasis on the strengthening of social protection systems, comprehensive care policies, and high-quality public policies to be put in place. The idea being to make progress in social protection systems with its four features: universal, sustainable, resilient, high-quality public policies that are efficient and sustainable, and also focus on labor policy inclusion or labor inclusion policies. We should also, of course, be aware of any potential disasters. It's also supposed to be a policy against disasters, and of course, we should also wage a bet on strengthening social frameworks. The third point was action for inclusive social development in Latin America and the Caribbean. As I mentioned earlier, the Regional Sustainable Development Agenda passed in Mexico on the third meeting calls to mind this social dimension of the whole agenda. I talked about poverty a few minutes ago, and poverty has gone down 26.3% in 30 years. And if you work out the math and check the results, we all know that lowering poverty, by 30, 40 is not the same as lowering it by 50 or 80 or 90, or especially considering the future time horizons. So in Spanish, as we often say, if you don't change what you're doing to tackle policy, it will take the region more than 30 years to achieve the objective or the goal of eradicating poverty. So if we keep on doing exactly the same as before, it'll be even less. We won't even get to the half of the century. So what we have discussed, you probably remember, the first resolution was to seek out financing mechanisms. And the conclusion reached by the document, and which is proposed as an agreement from this conference, which, by the way, has already been agreed by the presiding officers, including Minister Diaz and the Vice President. The idea here is essentially to make progress towards an investment standard for non-contributory social protection aimed at eradicating poverty in the countries. Just as you have investment indicators in healthcare or investment indicators in education, for example, or what kind of spending should you have for early childhood care. So this is the proposal. Enable the region to evolve, including in non-contributory protection systems. It is precisely this contribution that ministries for social development provide the world in the form of non-contributory systems, particularly to people or for people who live in poverty or extreme poverty. In 2.5, you see that between 2 to 10% of the total spending should be allotted to eradicate poverty. which does not mean that we or the country should not keep on doing what they are doing. What it does mean is that we believe we have to up the investment level, increase the investment level with financial sustainability and tax pacts that will enable proper social welfare to the population. Which brings us to the third topic, a commitment towards social or inclusive social development, which talks to the fourth proposal, which is a global pact for social or inclusive social development, as drafted in this document and as also mentioned by Minister Torres. A social pact for inclusive development, bringing together all countries with a strategic vision and mutual benefits. Reference was made earlier to social investments, indicating that it is necessary to increase the amount of funds with sustainability, financial sustainability in particular. Once society is strengthened, it will be easier to implement the global digital pact. The global society will be increasingly digital. The world will become increasingly digital. It is therefore very important for us to invest in social digital protection while strengthening the multilateral systems and cooperation to foster an exchange of experiences, technical lessons, knowledge, and institutional experience. So this diagram very much illustrates the social pact for social inclusive social development, very much in line with the SDGs and the Agenda 2030 and the Pact for the Future. A pact that will bring together all countries around the strategic investments approach, cooperation, mutual benefits, and one which will highlight the different rights, entitlements, and prioritize actions according to the funds so as to be able to overcome the hurdles and constraints that otherwise or would otherwise hinder implementation thereof. The document, and I'm sure you, the countries, have already deliberated on the point regarding the political agreement to be brought to the Assembly. I understand as of next week or in 2 more weeks in New York, and which will be brought or taken on to Qatar. I'm sure the countries have discussed the political agreement to be proposed as a response in Qatar. And this is public information. It is available on our web page, which has been in every draft, 1, 2, 3. We have monitored this debate in different countries to see how proposals in and from the region are somehow supported. There is an agreement on topics such as inequality and poverty, which are really top on the agenda. There's also a commitment towards healthy social inclusion, as well as an approach or focus on human rights, bearing in mind, of course, the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030, coordinate high-quality public policies with social protection systems, and also an institutional framework with the appropriate components, and also proposals for sector-specific policies, especially in education, healthcare, etc., with a strong emphasis on active labor and labor inclusion policies. I'm not sure how I'm doing. We seem to have a minor problem with the presentation, says the minister. More concretely, in conclusion, the document and over the past 2 years, we have been talking about development strategies. And those of us at ECLAC have heard many references to inclusive social development. Essentially, what we propose is that every national development strategy should take into account the social dimension thereof, which we call inclusive social development. And when we talk about inclusive social development, we are placing people at the very center of the agenda, people and their rights, as part of a development strategy that will provide or enable a poverty, hunger, and inequality-free pathway for people, therefore achieving a high level of well-being, coupled with sustainable and high economic development, in such a way as to deliver financial sustainability in the end of the day and ensure proper financing to social protection. Universal, comprehensive, sustainable, resilient social protection systems, which constitute the backbone of inclusive social development, where the key players are the ministries for social development or equivalent agencies. They are the ones who are being called upon to design and implement these comprehensive social policies for labor, social inequality, high quality policies to be complemented by healthcare, education services, and labor inclusion policies. And emphasis is placed on the comprehensive nature of these systems to face up to poverty and inequality. To that end, mechanisms are required, such as, for example, measuring the multidimensional nature of poverty and inequality. It is in this context that the efforts conducted by you through your commissions over the past 2 years, as led by Minister Toro, and I'm sure that Minister Diaz will replicate the same efforts over the next 2 years. I'm sure you will. And we believe that this regional conference is a very substantial example for the whole region, for us to move on and disseminate further knowledge and information. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alberto. And to all your staff for this impressive report and presentation. And also for all these reflections you have shared and called our attention to. No doubt each country will pay close attention to the challenges that we have been facing for the last 30 years, and also the challenges in the future. I would like to give the floor now to make comments on the document to our dear Javiera Toro, speaking for Chile. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. I also congratulate and thank ECLAC for the work it has done, its technical team led by Alberto Arenas in drawing up this document, which no doubt is a necessary and crucial import that shows that our region can have a position, strategic, historic position that's consistent for social development since the Copenhagen summit in '95, going into the next summit in Qatar this year. And we are hoping that humanity is looking to us to move towards these discussions to discuss and build about social development. We are facing a global context in which authoritarianism is gaining ground and the democracy is losing ground in the citizen and in national authorities. And that scenario is a unique opportunity to put into effect integral social mechanisms for cooperation and push inclusive social development that's resilient and sustainable as part of a global pact for social development. Social development, the existence of spaces like we are in today, an ongoing commitment to multilateralism, regional integration, especially South-South cooperation, must work hand in hand with all the different cooperation spaces. We're convinced that in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have much to contribute to the global discussions on how to deal with the challenges that we're facing. Low economic growth, high inequality, climate crisis, and weak institutional capacities, well described by ECLAC in its work. Coming out of this work and the efforts carried out jointly in our region, and thanks to the technical leadership offered by ECLAC, we have this document that clearly and precisely illustrates our progress on the objectives set in the first social summit in 1995. No doubt, we must celebrate and congratulate ourselves for this progress in people's lives, institutionalizing the ministries of social development, better indicators on poverty and extreme poverty, advance in education, health, and social security policies. These are elements we must recognize that have been achieved. However, we are not satisfied with these outcomes. 30 years after the first social summit, we are still the region with the greatest inequality rates in the world. We have to intensify our efforts on climate change that demand responses to emergencies to be more resilient and effective. The COVID-19 was a real blow against gender rights. Some countries are still fighting to get back to their pre-pandemic levels, and the demographic challenges on social and health and education systems as well. It's urgent that the pact we want to renew in the second summit include the commitment to advance in policies for a new development model that can generate opportunities for economic growth to sustain integrated social systems. And we need to recover the confidence of people in their institutions, that we are part of the governments. We who are in the governments know that this is a commitment, and these are democratic commitments in different parts of the world. This is a call your attention to all political players who have not responded in a timely fashion to the needs of our peoples. And also the multilateral agencies must realize what their failures have been, what they have not been able to do, and why not. And only by recognizing those shortcomings will we open up to the citizenship and recover this confidence, strengthening politics as a means to put people in the center. And we need to look at the main points in the documents. One of the most important challenges is how to improve today's policies with strategies that would allow to universalize coverage and strengthen the institutionality for sustainability and family life. The healthcare and social care are important that they be universal based on consolidated policies. In Chile, we have the challenge of configuring the care as a fourth pillar with health and education, and this is a strategic social investment. The care policies that recognize non-remunerated contribution have to recognize gender equalities, not just in families, but in the private sector as well. And then just social justice is important because care takes care of families, the economy, and our lives. And this has to be considered in the labor market, education, health, and economic growth. To ignore that as an objective and not give priority is a strategic area for which we will be questioned in the future. The care leads to social cohesion that's necessary for social development, and one of the major challenges to confront to improve the confidence of people in the institutions and in themselves. And these good wishes may be nothing but wishful thinking, that we need to actually urgently build new development tools centered on people and their families. We have to look at the role of the state, not just to correct market failings, but to ensure social justice and transform production. We need a complex economy with greater technological and industrial added value, and produce innovative services, including women, to overcome the gaps in labor participation. That demands more innovation, investments, and strategic education in renewable energy and access to wealth. That's the only way we'll have sustainable growth with social participation. Today, 63 days before we meet again in Qatar, we have the responsibility as a region to represent the role of those who are paved the way to where we are now for social protection in our country. Our commitment coming out of the regional conferences and the work we have done in recent years is to advance towards a global pact for social inclusion, and we need to work not just between now and November, but in the coming years. This is a duty for us to prioritize the people's needs. Social development is a fundamental pillar to achieve that. And this document synthesizes well the work of these 2 years and our commitment as all of our countries that participate in the conference, and the timetable of activities that we have before us to feed into the experiences of the different countries that show that we effectively do have contributions to make from our region to global debates. I would take this chance now to issue a call to all of you to not lose the priorities of the real needs and urgency of people, to integrate society through the production system, robust, sustainable production systems, projecting a care society with indicators not that are relative to public policies beyond just employment and the economics, but we have to have positions that were broadly questioned worldwide in our region as well, in each of our countries. Social welfare is an investment to grow towards a sustainable future. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister Javiera Toro. And also, speaking for Brazil, I would like to mention how pleased we are with the presentation of that document. The position presented by ECLAC no doubt provides us with a deep and realistic pathway for our region. I would like to highlight the victories, for example, with the consolidation of the presence of social structures in almost all countries as ministries of social development or as similar institutions for social protection. I would also highlight how our region has begun to work with this heritage of innovation, the income transfer. For example, if we look at food production, already integrated into school lunch programs, and as a policy for social care, is a point where we can make more and more progress. All of our countries are facing the challenge of the growth of the share of the population that is elderly, and how we will deal with that in our countries, and focusing not just on persons who are being cared for, but also the caretakers, peoples, especially women, since most often they put a whole life of dedicated to caring for other people. Another concern in the social records and registries put science at work and be more present. That integration with several other policies, more and more our countries are aware of how to look in an overview of an integral approach to human beings. From pregnant women, mothers, babies, children, adolescents, adults, and later on during one's old age. How to look at all that in an integral approach. And I would like to express my position for this document that has been presented for us to courageously be able to defend at the social summit in Doha that concept of inclusive development. That is a very important step that could be a strong grounding for our position as a region, precisely at this time in Doha. And then, of course, based on the reflections that have been shared, we can look at how important it is to get out of the trap of just looking at palliative solutions. Of course, we need to ensure food for people who do not have food, but we must also provide conditions to take steps and for people to evolve. We're at a moment now with very slow improvement since 2010. So there's a need for inclusion as a decisive step: health, education, productive inclusion, employment, small-scale businesses, and provide the conditions for people to evolve. And therefore, on the eve of the second summit now, I'd like to take this chance to say, speaking for Brazil, and I believe speaking for our region, we must firmly support the ECLA documents support in favor of a global pact for inclusive social development. That step is fundamental. Latin America and the Caribbean do have authorities to arrive in Doha firmly with that position. And that is how Brazil, together with Latin America and countries from other regions of the world, we have been collaborating to build a global alliance against hunger and poverty, so that post-Doha, we will have the tools and commitments in our hands so that more developed countries can collaborate with developing countries. So here, with these words, I would like to say that we must move forward shoulder to shoulder with our brother and sister countries and with the United Nations and all our partners who are here that can join into this effort. So I'm very thankful for this presentation. Of course, that does not conclude our work with the presentation of the report. We'll still have many good discussions. And now the proposal is we take a break until 3 p.m. I would remind you that we also defend zero hunger here. And during this lunch break, I hope you also have a chance to be at the side events and be back here at 3 p.m. Thank you very much. That concludes our morning session. Good afternoon. We're very happy to begin our work again this afternoon, and I greet the whole front table. And we're beginning now With our afternoon session, we'll begin with the reading of the declaration of a letter from civil society from Brazil and Latin America and the Caribbean. They met here in Brasilia on September 1st. They gathered here before the opening of our conference. So I'll give the floor, first of all, representing this many social movements who have been here, to Flavio Lino from the National Movement of the Street People, Laura Janequim from the ECLAC mechanism, Milton Rezende from the Central Workers Confederation in Brazil, and Renata Giuliotti from the Women's Institute. They're figuring out who speaks first. I give the floor, first of all, to Renata Giuliotti. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Good afternoon. I'm very thankful. I will speak in Spanish. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We recognize the efforts in the holding of this preparatory conference for the Second World Summit for Social Development. We consider this to be a fundamental space to contribute with proposals, relationships, and policies for a more just, egalitarian, and equitable society. We are also thankful for the support in the coordination of the Accessory for Social and Diversity Secretariat of ECLAC to facilitate the process of collective reflections of hundreds of representatives of civil society organizations and social movements, trade unions, and networks and collectives, councils, fora, and as well as activists, researchers, teachers, educators, and students from our region. Also, for having made available the platforms Participa Brazil and IPDH, which in the first version of the document was made available for public consultation. As a result, we drafted a powerful declaration entitled For Social Justice, Economic and Climate Justice, Participatory Democracy, and Sustainable Development for the Population of Latin America and the Caribbean. It's my pleasure to highlight our main proposals, and we call on all of you to be in touch with the full content on the ECLAC website. We will read the first part in Spanish and the second part in Portuguese. First, for social and economic justice, overcoming historic and structural inequalities demands strong states, redistributive policies, and universal policies. We're confronting serious problems of discrimination in services for health, education, social security, and decent work, which demand urgent responses. That we therefore demand that states implement and strengthen free public, universal social services that are integrated, sustainable, and equitable. They strengthen the role of the state in providing free public services and goods with inclusive education that is anti-racist, anti-capitalist, and non-sexist, in addition to ensuring full integral health, access to housing, transportation, and food security. that they adopt mechanisms, tax mechanisms on the super rich and major corporations based on fiscal justice to have more public budgets to finance human rights and public services overall, and support a multilateral mechanism to restructure sovereign debt and establish a regional pact against the evasion and tax evasion, the illicit flow of resources and taxes. And second, for participatory documents, democracy and governance, where we have risk of new authoritarian regimes, hate speech, and the reduction of democratic spaces. To overcome that scenario, we must strengthen social participation, guarantee transportation, and promote solidarity and participation in the front of global challenges. We ask the states to ensure the right to active and representative participation of all people, creating flexible decision-making on permanent spaces such as councils, conferences, and defense offices, that they commit themselves to transparency with mechanisms for access to information and broken down data, establish concrete mechanisms for international cooperation in solidarity and humanitarian aid to populations affected by wars, armed conflicts, and the violations of human rights, emphasizing the defense of a just peace and the recognition of Palestine as a sovereign state. Now I'll go into Portuguese by Brother Flavio. For development with climate justice, racial justice, ethnic and gender justice, the climate crisis and the extractivist model increase inequalities and affect unfairly people who are historically vulnerable. The construction of a just future demands transitions, recognition of rights, and putting value on local knowledge. We demand just transitions with energy sovereignty and a new agriculture model with protagonisms for the social players in their areas. Public investments in socio-bioeconomy, agroecology, care economy, and solidarity economy focused on with an intersectional cross-cutting focus, fighting hunger and guaranteeing food security, overcoming racial and gender inequalities, regional adoption of the SDG 18, ethnic and racial equity, and support for the creation of new SDGs, promotion of decent work as a pillar of sustainable development, climate policies that are specific for children based on environmental justice and equity, intergenerational equity, promotion of sustainable development with mental health, social justice, and overcoming structural inequalities. Joining into the commitments of UNDRIP and UNDROP, strengthening knowledge and power of people in their territories. Give the floor now to Miltinho. In this seminar, we renew our alliances amongst the people of Latin America and the Caribbean, and we reiterate our expectation that the governments of countries in the region will take on clear commitments that are measurable and binding in preparation for the World Social Summit. Therefore, we propose to treat as public audiences for social development policies all those people who are historically vulnerable, and considering their markers of gender, race, class, age, deficiencies, disabilities, or ethnicity, and their intersectional relations and cross-cutting relationships, and have goals for representativity of social society and their participation, as well as social movements and public policies, allocating budgets with equity and transparency, to put all human rights and nature's rights in the center of development, recognizing that they are indivisible and interdependent. We recognize the human right to migration with policies of welcoming people who are dislocated, who are because of economic crisis or climate crisis, and to create cross-cutting intersectional plans to eradicate extreme poverty, inclusion of children, adolescents, and young people in building these, in writing those documents, to create and institutionalize and strengthen specific commissions aimed at populations that are historically vulnerable, as we mentioned before, including populations in street people, to guarantee their effective participation and the recognition of their rights and promotion of equity in decision-making spaces. Social justice, equity, and sustainability are urgent. Wealth that is concentrated, racism, patriarchy, and environmental destruction all threaten our future, the present, and the future. We reaffirm that without the peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean, there is no 2030 agenda. We call on the states, the UN system, and the international community to hear the clamor from the territories and to turn promises into concrete action. We will continue to work together in networks, in resistance, with hope. Long live the peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean. Long live the social movement. Thank you. Thank you. We thank Fraviolino, Laura, Genettini, Milton Rezende, and Renata Giudioci for the work they did. Please communicate to your social movements that we have received the declaration, this letter, and we will make it available for all the representatives of the many different countries and agencies who are working here. And it will certainly be the object of study by all. Thank you. Going on with our afternoon session. Now, my dear delegates, we have nearly 2 hours to hear the statements by delegations. We ask that people in institutions to limit themselves to about 3 minutes, and I ask the delegations to raise their cards, their signs, to ask for the floor. And I'll ask the Secretariat to take note. And with the Secretary's help, we will make up the list of speakers. We'll give the floor first to the minister from Paraguay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Members of the head table, ministers and authorities present, friends from the civil society, a very good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here participating in the 6th meeting in Brasilia, which always receives us in the best possible way. And together with the other delegations, we will make intelligent decisions that will help us to bring better days for our citizens in Latin America and the Caribbean. We congratulate the Brazilian delegation, wish you success in your chairmanship, and we know that with the leadership of Wellington Diaz, things will be simpler. At the same time, I would like to take this chance to thank the delegation from Chile and congratulate them for the efforts they have carried out over the recent years to carry out all the work, which is not easy. And at the same time, I take this chance to congratulate ECLAC for its wonderful work day to day, helping countries to present this document that Alberto has shared with us, and through him to greet all the collaborators at ECLAC, because this reflects the work of a team. From Paraguay, we are grateful for the content of this document, which is a position on the 6th regional conference in Latin America and social and the work for an inclusive social pact globally. We're pleased with the document, which is a substantive contribution of this region to the 2nd global summit to be held in Qatar this year. And we congratulate the social movements talking about the agenda, the 2030 agenda, being proactive in ensuring victories for the coming decades, ensuring conclusive development for the entire region. What's clear to me from what Alberto said this morning, we are around a table, and around that table, it's not easy to move quickly, but nor can we wait another 30 years to overcome vulnerability and poverty in our country. The document makes clear that poverty has been reduced in recent years, and the main factors for that reduction is economic growth, the increase of women's participation in the labor force, in more social spending by governments, and new social policies and the role of public transfers such as conditioned monetary transfers, the non-contributive pensions, but also to contribute and to continue in that direction, we need to invest more in education and making health accessible, as well as improving the quality of these services in overcoming health and malnutrition, which are still a reality in our region. As the document also says, our country is harmonized with international development. We have social policies to confront poverty, hunger, and inequality, and make progress in the exercise of social rights. There is no way back. When we took over the government with Santiago Peña in the government of Paraguay, we decided to move forward, not continue with the status quo. We have taken the less taken path. It's just more difficult to bet on real changes and change our institutions. A sample of that are profound legislative changes with more social spending, which shows a real commitment to those transformations. Paraguay today is an example of macroeconomic stability and sustained growth in our region, with an economy that has grown from 4% from 2013 to 2024, and a reduction of poverty from 60 to 20% in the past 2 decades. There's a success in international development as recognized by prudent economic development. The Paraguayan model is recognized worldwide. It's not been in vain that it's the first country in 10 years to achieve investment degree. This shows civil dignity as well as economic dignity. There is much still to be done, very much, but we're going in the right direction. With one example of our government's commitment, I would mention that the budget of health has increased by 8.8% in addition to the greater coverage and the purchase of more oncological medicine. Very important problem in our country. In education, we increased 18% the budget in Social Security. Budget increased 13.8% in social programs, an increase of 10.6% to finance universal coverage of zero hunger and the coverage of older adults. We are working for the future we want, such as feeding the future, the children as our most valued treasury, to ensure healthy development of children from conception to 8 years old. The program is giving integral attention to early childhood, to health, education, nutrition, and support for families. Zero Hunger in School is another program that we began last year with coverage of 5%. Today is feeding more than 1 million children from first grade through the entire elementary school in local areas with purchases from local small farmers and small and medium-sized companies. Our children are in the priority now. 696,000 complete scholarships for 25, which was going on beyond our goal, our initial goal. And in terms of that, we are training more teachers and technicians. The Chirapona program, which in Spanish means "my beautiful house," is a housing program that's not just for vulnerable people, but the new program benefits people with medium income interested in purchasing or building their own houses, and we hope that all families can have their own roof. The promotion for the elderly is for our grandparents to be taken care of in the difficult time of their lives. Now it's only 22% to go cover all elderly people who meet the qualifications of the new law. And our monetary transfer program is assisting more than 200,000 families that are vulnerable, including indigenous people. And that program has been in existence for 20 years in the country. In Paraguay, we are changing. It's an irreversible process. However, the pathway to development has no shortcuts. It demands discipline, constancy, and courage to take difficult decisions. There are no magic tricks. It's hard work and honest work. In that sense, we are pleased and honored to bring to you today more than the positive results of recent work, but I wish to say that we are candidates for a country to host the 7th conference on social development in Latin America and Caribbean in 2027. We hope that will be an Asunción. For our government to carry out the 7th conference will be a crown on the efforts that we have been undertaking in the recent years, and showing all delegates the efforts made and to emphasize that chance. So, dear delegates, we hope that all of you support our candidacy. Today, with the new leadership of the ministerial forum, we congratulate Minister Wellington and his team and reiterate Paraguay's interest in supporting all the initiatives of this new chair and together with all the countries. Since 2015, we have been carrying out all the objectives of promoting improving national social development policies, eliminating poverty, inequality, and reducing structural differences. So we have a commitment that is humble but firm, and my delegation is happy to be one of the vice presidencies of this Congress in putting social inclusion, reduced unemployment, and decent work for all inhabitants of this part of the world. And concluding my words to the plenary, I wish us all good work in these days and that our efforts be crowned with success. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I want to thank the minister from Paraguay for his remarks and also for the offer to hold the next meeting, and which we will consider on the last day, and we expect to address the issue in a timely fashion. At this time, I'd like to give the floor to our dear Minister Luisa Abrão, the National Secretary in a rather new area in Brazil. I'm talking about the National Secretariat for Care Policies. And I'd like to promptly give her the floor. She will be moderating this session.
We want to thank Minister Wellington Diaz for his work in this conference. 30 years after the first World Summit on Social Development in Copenhagen, like we heard this morning, we're at a turning point. The current challenges, the bellic, wartime, climate, technological, economic, demand profound reflections on a global commitment to social development. In that context, Spain puts value on the presentation of the document today, Latin America and the Caribbean, 30 years since the first World Summit for inclusive social development, which was written by ECLAC. This document is not just a rigorous analysis, not up-to-date analysis on the progress, setbacks, and structural challenges in the region, but also makes clear the urgency of advancing towards a new global pact for social inclusive development and focused on human development and sustainability. And we need to show that the importance of that priority, putting the accent on the struggle against poverty, gender equality, public issues, and strengthening institutions and democracy. All of this we raise through horizontal cooperation mechanisms in dialogue with member countries. Although we face times of uncertainty, our cooperation maintains the qualitative and qualitative nature. I will conclude by underlining that in line with the ECLEC's proposals, we believe firmly that social development should take the central role in the international agenda.
Just as the economic, environmental, digital, and security dimensions. For this reason, we support the proposal to move towards a new regional social pact as a prior step towards broader coordination efforts at a global level. Spain would like to reassert its commitment towards that vision and hereby it is not just of correcting inequalities, but it's about transforming and developing, not leave anyone much. The floor is open for any other delegations if you would like to voice your views at this point. Colombia has the floor. Thank you very much. It really is an honor for us to greet the presiding officers and all other members attending this session. It really is an honor for me to address you at this time to again affirm Colombia's commitment to sustainable development. Accordingly, it is our view that the information contained in this document further underscores our conviction to mobilize joint efforts as a region with a view to accomplish clear-cut commitments on the occasion of the upcoming second summit on social development, which quite certainly will lead to a better welfare conditions to all persons, especially the underprivileged, including expansion of coverage in education services, healthcare, etc. It is also relevant to highlight that there remain major gaps and challenges which we should address in a decisive and clear manner. This region has gone through almost 2 or 3 lost decades as regards the goals of eradicating poverty in a compelling manner, since roughly almost 30% of the continent's population still suffers from poverty. For Colombia, eradicating poverty, creating decent work opportunities and conditions, and driving or fostering social development are key pillars for a more fair and equitable country. Nevertheless, as indicated in the report, high inequality in its multiple dimensions and low social mobility, as well as the weak social cohesion, are a structural trap in the region, which prevent countries from moving towards inclusive social development, which is further worsened by the high labor informality, coming to about almost 45.5%, according to an ECLEC report, meaning people are very limited in terms of accessing conditions for decent living. Our commitment to decent work is a firm commitment, and we believe that decent employment is the driver for collective well-being. We also believe that the current challenges, the climate change crisis, demography changes, emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence and the like, pose a major challenge for social inclusion of the underprivileged sectors or segments of the population. Given all the above, we would like to reiterate our call to all, so that we be able to achieve egalitarian opportunity commitments on the upcoming second summit on social development, especially for indigenous peoples and people of African descent and other historically excluded populations. As a region, we should become a reference in terms of social development with a focus on the most vulnerable populations, protection and inclusion of vulnerable peoples, human rights, considering also the gender, ethnic, racial, and territorial dimensions. In conclusion, Colombia would like to thank ECLAC for submitting this document, which really provides evidence that as a region we cannot afford to wait another 30 years. It is time for us to work jointly and achieve a global commitment at Doha so as to achieve decent work and move towards actual social inclusion. Thank you very much. Minister Leon from Costa Rica now has the floor. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Special greetings to the head table. It really gives me great pleasure to share with you some information which we believe is key. Number one, we are very appreciative to ECLAC for the ability to summarize the feelings of the countries that are represented and very much reflected in this document, which I believe does indeed mirror our feelings. So congratulations to those who were able to so aptly summarize the feelings of the region in the document. I have heard all of those who spoke before me, and I have been attending several events and meetings in the course of many years. So thank you so much. And the title refers to Towards a Global Pact on Inclusive Social Development. That is, if you will, a tagline, a very appropriate and powerful slogan, so powerful that Costa Rica very much feels it very much reflects our intention. As you can tell, the document is a major asset in that it helps us sell our purposes for the upcoming global summit as agreed in each of the different countries of the region. Of course, in Costa Rica, social or inclusive social development is not just a purpose or objective in and of itself. It is not just a public policy objective. Inclusive social development in Costa Rica is more than that. It is a guiding principle in our efforts, not only in but also outside of the country. And it's so good to see it really with a rather different overtone in the title of the document, because it seems that it has now become a mandatory obligation to all of us in charge of social policies in our countries. So this guiding principle is such that I would like to share with you a few pieces of information. Over the past few years, Costa Rica has managed to lower its poverty level by 5% in 3 years. We have lowered poverty levels, and today extreme poverty is 4.8% and basic poverty 1.18%. But among these figures, I believe that there are figures that do indeed reflect the country's interest and commitment to inclusive social development. For the first time, we seem to see a significant reduction in poverty among women and women heads of households, which is really relevant in Costa Rica because many of our households are made up by women heads of households. We have also succeeded in lowering poverty in the countryside, in rural areas, coming down from 27% down to 22% of rural poverty in our territories. Although these figures may sound like little, the fact is that the distance between 2020 and now clearly show that these reductions have been very substantial. Also, for the first time, we have managed to improve our Gini index. It's at 0.49 percentage points, which is one of the best indicators we have in Costa Rica, which shows that we have succeeded in lessening or reducing inequality in our country. So based on this guiding or overarching principle, which is inclusive social development, based on that principle, we have developed a number of factors which we have described as unnegotiable points. These unnegotiable points, I'd like to share some of them with you now because they are part of the overall political framework that has enabled us to achieve these results. I'm not going to show them as actual results, but rather as a reflection of our commitment. In this specific case, in Costa Rica, our commitment to this global crusade. And they are really unnegotiable because what we do, we believe, should serve the interests of people. It does not necessarily have to serve the interests of institutions, but rather serve the interests or needs of people. And let me place the emphasis on this point because very often when we develop social services or products, we very often think about the operating aspects of the institution, whether or not the institution can or cannot do it, whether or not it serves its purposes. We have pretty much sidelined that approach to become more committed to supplying or providing products and services that are actually relevant and serve the interests of the people from a social perspective. That is an important difference. Another unnegotiable point is the fact that today our decisions are based on data. And this is an important point which clearly reflects our commitment to strengthening the national single beneficiary registration. About 86% of our society is integrated in that registry, and we're also working and integrating efforts with institutions from other sectors, which in one way or another work with the social sector and have a related agenda. These efforts, these registration efforts, have allowed us not only to provide and render better accounts and also increase transparency and trust. It has also allowed us to achieve results, as mentioned earlier, because we have succeeded in engaging in identification and targeting processes that have been very significant. Efforts to reduce poverty among households led by women or efforts in reducing poverty in the rural area is the result of the actual use of data that we have available from these registry systems. Hence the importance of even further strengthening these systems. Interestingly enough, once you do have a single registration system, the task of creating other products around the system becomes much simpler, and you can add on a number of strategic actions by means of public policy design that will prove to be a welcome add-on to the objectives you wish to achieve. Another unnegotiable point we have on the agenda is the fact that social protection is key in the country, but social promotion is even more important. Considering social promotion means considering overcoming poverty, not just meeting the needs of the poor. Very often we place an emphasis on meeting the needs of the poor, but we do not necessarily want to do that because we actually want to do more. We want to offer citizens what they really require. So in this regard, we have placed great emphasis on social promotion because as part of each of the different households, you have family members, household members who have their own profiles and features and unique features. And these features or unique profiles, with that information, we are able to tap into those features, profiles, and therefore we are able to design pathways that will help improve social promotion in each household. Today, when one gets a subsidy from each social institution in Brazil, you need to get the COC by means of joint responsibility. Joint responsibility involves a very strong social promotion rationale. We believe that we should always, of course, engage in social promotion efforts, especially for the elderly, the disabled, the dependent, and so forth. They all need social protection. However, households are not all made up 100% by this population profile. Households include dependent people who require social protection, but we also find family members or household members who deserve, not so much require, but deserve actions regarding social promotion. Social promotion efforts will allow us, or has allowed us to engage in two very significant actions: employment and self-employment. These are the two variables that enable income creation and which in turn allow us to assertively or speedily move towards reducing poverty. And the last unnegotiable point we have in Costa Rica in our social promotion, social development agenda is the fact that the actions that we engage in to meet people's needs and interests should be followed and coupled with interinstitutional efforts. We have made a substantial effort to sideline the myth that the intellectual proposal to reduce poverty is by one given person. Not so. It is something that resides with the state apparatus. Social promotion requires very often families involved in agricultural programs, but of course it serves no purpose to just have a program if the Ministry of Agriculture does not offer the opportunity. So it is a policy to be espoused by the state apparatus. In conclusion, I'd like to thank ECLAC for all of its ongoing efforts and also the efforts undertaken by Chile and also Brazil to reflect our concerns in the upcoming summit. In addition, I would like to voice not so much a concern, but rather I'd like to call everyone's attention to the fact that this is an effort that makes sense only and only if countries are indeed and truly committed. And this commitment does not necessarily mean more funding or more financial resources. It is about more transparency. It is about more trust and confidence to make the most of the funds and resources that are available, and clearly stating what are and why it is important to actually meet everyone's needs in the region. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Good afternoon. Yes, good afternoon. Ecuador now has the floor. The Dominican Republic. Hello. Good afternoon, one and all. I'd like to start out by voicing my most sincere thanks to ECLAC and the government of Brazil for organizing this important regional conference on social development. To me, it really is an honor to attend this conference in Brasilia, sharing with leaders and subject matter experts who are truly committed to the overall social development of the region. This conference is an invaluable opportunity for us to share knowledge, experience, and best practices in the promotion of social development. As a country, we would like to warmly congratulate the presiding officers for their dedication and leadership in promoting social development in Latin America and the Caribbean. Your efforts have proved critical in helping us advance in the social agenda and are a source of inspiration. Your commitment to the region and its people is an example to be followed. I would also like to express my admiration for the document submitted today. The document is a powerful call to collective action to address the persisting and lingering challenges of hunger, inequality, and poverty in the region. Once again, ECLAC has shown its ability to analyze and propose innovative solutions to social problems that the country still faces, or the region still faces. As a country, we join efforts against hunger, poverty, and inequality. And we believe that a global pact for inclusive social development is an ethical, moral, economic imperative. Inequality and poverty are not just moral problems, but they also have a strong impact on social stability. We believe that together we can make a significant difference in the lives of millions of people in the region. Accordingly, as mentioned earlier, the government of Ecuador reaffirms its interest in being part of the presiding officer of this conference, and we are willing to work together with member countries to promote social development and improve the overall standards of living of our citizens. We believe that our participation in or among presiding officers will be an important step towards advancing in the implementation of policies and programs that will prove beneficial not only to our country but also to the entire region. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The Dominican Republic now has the floor. Greetings to all presiding officers at the head table. Greetings to all authorities and kindly receive the very brotherly meetings from the Dominican Republic. We wish to thank ECLAC for its outstanding effort in preparing the document at hand. Everything that has been presented and the reception we have been given as a delegation. Special greetings to Minister Diaz, although he's not here anymore, in his capacity as president of this regional conference. I'd also like to congratulate ECLAC for its effort in submitting this document. It really provides a clear-cut and strategic roadmap for our countries. Its inputs reaffirm the importance of the social dialogue and cooperation as key pillars for us to move towards inclusive and sustainable development. May I also voice my special thanks to Director Arenas for the efforts undertaken from his division in supporting this broad-ranging transformation process experienced in the Dominican Republic today, so that we keep on moving forward. The Dominican Republic, as mentioned earlier, has experienced significant advances in social development, or advancements in social developments. At the same time, we have upheld sustainable economic development. Over the past 2 decades, we have managed to reduce poverty by more than 32 points percentage-wise, moving from 50% or 20+% down to 18% in 2023. Extreme poverty went down to 4.9%. This progress has been possible due to institutional strengthening and macroeconomic stability, and due to much more orchestrated and concerted social policies. Today we have a unique window of opportunity, a major opportunity as mentioned by ECLAC, which requires a much more serious commitment on the part of the governments in achieving this social dialogue. As we heard in the side event a few minutes ago, we must keep on strengthening the social dialogue at our institutional level, together with the private sector, stakeholders, and by means of the different programs and strategies that are undertaken by the country. These are opportunities and places where we are able to learn more about the experience of other countries, and they really add so much to our own experience in the Dominican Republic. I could say so much, but I don't want to dwell so much on this point, but may I briefly pinpoint that in the Dominican Republic we are experiencing substantial breakthroughs, and we have a clear-cut commitment in working on the so-called adaptive social protection. We have managed to bring together at the same table civil protection and social protection so as to provide a more appropriate response to the devastating crises that have impacted our island. As part of this adapted social protection approach, we managed to coordinate transfers as well as care and resiliency, all of which is, of course, in line with the regional social and inclusive development agenda, as well as with the global commitments that have been put forth by the Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. I also wish to thank the Minister for Social Development, because the Dominican Republic has been chosen as a priority country for speedy, fast-track support, not only in its economic inclusion program, but also as part of its family farming economic inclusion program. Despite all of the advancements in the Dominican Republic, we still have persistent challenges. For example, closing the inequality gaps, expand the quality of services and care, and also achieve tax sustainability for our social policies. These are the main challenges we currently face. For all of the above, the Dominican Republic would like to express its strong interest in being part of the head table and presiding officers of the upcoming regional conference, because we believe that from that standpoint, we will be able to share our experience and learn from best practices in the region, while moving towards a shared pact and dialogue for social development in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you so much.
Now we will hear from the representative of Peru. Good afternoon. My fraternal greetings from the government of Peru, in the sense of having more dialogue through our Ministry of Transportation I greet the presiding table and Minister Wellington Diaz, who will have 2 years of very hard work beginning today, and also greet the outgoing chair, and they have made possible this event that brings us all together to network with each other and work with so many social issues we have in our countries. In Peru, we greet all the brother delegations of civil society and international organizations. I would like to mention, in the case of my country, that after having returned to democracy in 2000, about 25 years ago, when it had been interrupted, we have had sustained growth of 4%, one of the highest in the entire region. And this has helped reduce macroeconomically and legally the many social problems. So we began with the program of your own roof, techo propio, for more vulnerable families to be able to afford a house. Because it's not just social development and equality, but we have to focus on inclusion, but it means not having a roof under which to live. Also, we have improved in our administrative bodies, not just helping people, giving assistance, but working with the people, helping people learn to fish, we might say. Amongst the social programs that have helped us to overcome the gaps has been Water for All, Agua para Todos. And the sewage systems as well have continued to grow. And the training program for labor, technical labor, through the SINCICO program, which is also underway. And for our children in grade school and even up through high school, for 15 years we have been carrying out this Qualikarma program to reduce poverty. We now have social programs such as Pension 65 or the Juntos program, which help most vulnerable families and elderly people over 65. That means the fact that poverty, about 53% rates today, despite the pandemic in 2021, when it's now down to 27.6%. And extreme poverty compared to last year, there was a reduction of 5%. Nonetheless, with this document in hand that guides us and leads us to work together to reduce that inequality and make social development a reality, our brother and sister peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean, we see that there still is gender inequality. We're fighting about that too. We say there is still corruption, which is a stigma that does not contribute to social development. And to that end, it is also important to look at the need to generate investments. Investments are generated with relations, with a contribution of the private sector as well. We are aware that this will not be solved quickly, but it guides us to push our governments to give support for education, health, infrastructure that will lead to a reduction of inequalities and have an impact on a positive impact on social development. Peru is together behind this brilliant document, which is called the World Pact for Inclusive Social Development. And that pact has to cover infrastructure as well, including native and peasant communities through the first peoples in our regions, where our country has begun a process of prior consent where we consult people before putting in mines, transportation works, airports, and others, because this is also a part of inclusive social development. I'm once again thankful to ECLAC and the organizers for the invitation, and we're here at your service. Thank you. I'd like to know if there's another delegation that would like to speak now. Otherwise, we give the floor to the representative from UNESCO. Thank you. She thinks the mic is, her mic is working, but she thinks it's not working. It is on. It is on. Thank you very much to ECLAC for giving them the space, and good afternoon to one and all. When we talk about reducing poverty, hunger, economic growth, social gaps, reducing inequalities and vulnerability to violence, increasing women's labor participation, all in the current context that's very complex, where we have to face up to global challenges such as climate change and new technologies such as artificial intelligence, which are changing our lives in real time. We also have to speak about the importance of investing in education, quality education for all, and that's relevant to tomorrow's world, because we all know that education is the most powerful tool we have to strengthen and transform our societies and remove people from poverty. It's also fundamental that our young people have critical thinking to confront disinformation and be able to face up to their citizens' duties and rights. We know that this education is fundamental for inclusive social development. According to the World Bank, for each dollar invested in education, the GDP goes up $20. But instead of having an increase in education, what we are seeing in regions is the contrary, a reduction, and it could not be a worse time in history to reduce and lower investments in education. We have just celebrated in Santiago de Chile a global summit of teachers, and where we put value on the profession of teachers when there's a scarcity of teachers, and we have to totally rethink our educational systems. I know that education is not under your direct responsibility, but my call to all the ministers present here today and the representatives of governments is that you continue to advocate to work for more education in your countries, because as we heard from the ECLAC report, to advance towards agreement on social inclusive development, it presupposes have universal education with inclusion, focused on providing services to exercise social rights, and including education as a key element. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll give the floor now to the representative of ACNUR, UNHCR, UN Human Rights Commission. It's on. Yes, it's on. Tell her it's on. It is on. Somebody tell her her microphone is on. I'm thankful to ECLAC, UNDP, and the MDS for organizing this conference and for their leadership in promoting more just and inclusive social development. The name of the UN, the Human Rights Agency, We need to have effective, strong social organizations to assure that no one is left behind, particularly those populations who are with forced displacements. According to UNHCR Global Tendency Report for 2024, by the end of 24, there were 21 people displaced by force in the Americas, representing 17% of the global total. The most of them remain in the region, mostly in countries like Colombia, Peru, Brazil, Chile, and Ecuador, where they stay. This demands sustained responses, including social protection and development. Joint studies by the World Bank, UNHCR, IDB, and OECD show that including migrants can bring good economic results for a country that can leave the GDP of welcoming countries up to 4.5 percentage points growth. And there is concrete proof of lower poverty, higher income, strengthening of social security. In Brazil, more than 240,000 Venezuelans and Haitians are already inserted into the formal labor market, contributing to the growth of our GDP with diversifying talents and skills, especially in sectors with a scarcity of labor. The refugees have less turnover and have positive impacts for companies and communities. However, there are still structural challenges. Based on a study done by the World Bank, despite the legal access to documentation, the probability of a Venezuelan getting a formal job in Brazil is only 0.3 compared to the local population. Access to education and social assistance is also limited, with a probability of 0.47 to 0.7 respective. Those obstacles are even more serious for people with high skills, including linguistic barriers, ignorance of rights, the difficulty to have recognition of diplomas, and restricted access to health and financial services. The local services are important to increase the demographic dividends of these peoples. UNHCR reaffirms its commitment to collaborating with the states and institutions, recognizing refugees as subjects of rights, contributing to reducing inequalities and strengthening social cohesion. Thank you for this chance, and we hope to continue working together to not leave anyone behind. Thank you very much. I'll give the floor now to the representative of FAO. Good afternoon. I would like to greet and thank ECLAC and UNDP for this conference and the Brazilian government for chairing this important conference, and to congratulate you for the report that was presented. In the name of FAO, I would draw your attention to social protection and the importance of emphasizing that social protection for rural populations who are vulnerable. In 2024 here, I'd like to quickly mention the importance of this, how these vulnerable rural populations can contribute to food security and overcoming malnutrition in Latin America and the Caribbean. In 2024, FAO, EICA, and the World Food Program launched a program to fund food security and nutritional security in Latin America and the Caribbean. And that document is the first approximation to the issue of the funding needed to eradicate hunger and food insecurity and malnutrition in all its forms in Latin America and the Caribbean. That report emphasizes, in particular, an analysis of public spending for the agricultural sector and social protection, as including measures by the public sector that are crucial in food security and nutrition of our population. FAO is here with all the delegations present, and we are open to carrying out this work. Thank you. If there's no one else that would like to take the floor, no, then I believe that we can adjourn this part of our event. I believe all the statements here have been very important, bringing the experiences of the various countries, expressing their support for the ECLAC document, and the objective of continuing to exchange experience and progress towards greater impacts for sustainable social development. So I think now we have we've finished our work. At 5 o'clock, the side events will begin. Yes, you're all invited. There are several side events. There's one on digital inclusion and inequality at 5, and another one with UNDP and dialogue. So thank you very much. Just one other point. Laís Abramos, the Vice Minister of Social Development in Brazil, our host, should also feel at home in ECLAC. She has been at several other conferences on social development at ECLAC. So, Laís, we feel that you should be at home here, and in these side events, we'll see you later and then tomorrow morning as we go on with our event. Thank you.